So, welcome everyone to our brand new little podcast. We are just millennials making a podcast because we want to break down what the heck is going on in the world and give it to you from our perspective because we feel like we're struggling too. So, my name's Theresa. I'm a real estate agent and my social media is at the Michigan Expert Everywhere.
My name is Nikki. I am a loan officer, and my social media is at Rini Home Loans Everywhere.
Rini Home Loans Everywhere. So yeah, we work in the real estate industry, but we were talking, and we really want to do like a podcast that is for everyone that's struggling in the economy right now, which is like everyone, and we're both millennials, so we figured we'd call it the Broke Millenials. And the major topic that Nikki and I have been talking about a lot as we're working with clients in our day-to-day life is just inflation and everything. And so we've looked up some things we want to share with you and kind of help you break it down because it's really hard to understand. So yeah.
Absolutely. So inflation is the average rise in cost in goods and services, and they measure it year over year. And there's been a lot of talk about inflation slowing down or coming down, and a lot of people that I've been seeing online are like, well, what the fuck? Because I feel like I'm still paying a lot more for stuff, and it's because you are. And so while inflation growth has slowed, that it doesn't mean that prices have come down. It just means that prices aren't going up as much year over year.
Yeah.
So last year we had 9% inflation, meaning from 2022 to 2023, at one point, prices on average had risen 9% year over year. In last month's report, we were at 3.1%, and the markets were expecting 2.9, so it came in a little higher than expected, meaning that in the last 2 years, prices for all goods and services averaged are up 12%. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is when you look into the details of these reports, for a lot of the necessities that you're paying for, it's up far more than that.
Right. It's like, for me in my day-to-day life, it just seems like more and more I'm just not willing to go out as much. I'm not willing to pay for things as much, and it just doesn't feel worth it anymore. Like it used to be, like when I was in college, it was no big deal to like go out to a club and go out to eat and do, like, even when I was a broke college kid, I could still afford to like go get sushi with my friends and go get a little coffee. And nowadays it's just like, I probably could pay for it, but I really just don't want to because everything's ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, college, the life of limited responsibilities. I wish I could fire up the DeLorean and go back to those days.
Right,
but
I was meeting one client just the other weekend, and I wanted to bring me and him both a coffee, and just 2 coffees and a croissant was $14.
Yep, I mean, even just the cost in like fast food has risen a lot. There've been a lot of people talking about like an $18 Big Mac meal. You know,
can't even go to McDonald's for $5 anymore, man.
Yeah, and then if you want to try and buy groceries, that's where you used to be able to save a lot of money, was buying food and making food at home. And while I still think that saves you money, if you look at groceries over the last 4 years, they're up 25% from 2019 to right now, and that's an average. And especially for things, I eat a lot of eggs. I'm a big egg guy, and eggs are crazy expensive, especially if you want the eggs that haven't been tortured as much as the other eggs.
Yeah, like the cage-free and everything like that. I used to be so into that kind of stuff because I was a vegetarian too for 10 years. So I used to like really. Now just eating kind of eating meat and everything like that. It used to be I was saving money because I was a vegetarian. I wasn't buying meat. Now, being a vegetarian is probably more expensive, but it's so stressful to me. I don't even add anything up anymore. I just get through the day. You kind of probably track more.
Yeah, I gotta live that. I gotta live that life because I diet a lot, so I can't eat out as often, and I definitely have to be careful and try to find the best deals that I can while I am grocery shopping. But the cost of necessities, the things that we have to buy, those are the things that have risen the most, which is why I think a lot of people are struggling.
Yeah.
And
the insurance and everything like that, like.
I think the thing about inflation that, what the Fed talks about is that the labor market's too strong, the economy's too strong, and that's why prices are sticky, right? And
like
it's because
BS to me.
it's because to me it is because it's not people making $20 an hour or even $30 an hour that are driving inflation. What drives inflation is the average cost of things, and who sets the cost for those things is companies, right? They set the cost for what we're paying, and for necessities, it's not like we can choose to not buy groceries.
Right.
It's not us millennials buying $7 coffees every day that's driving inflation.
There's so many TikToks out there like mocking, like people might make fun of us for our $7 coffee, and we're just like, well, we're like the meme of like the smiling dog in the flames, like, wow.
I've been making coffee at home for over 2 years, and for some reason I'm not a millionaire yet.
Right. I have my espresso machine here too that I haven't really gone out for coffees like I used to. I'm still not a millionaire either, so.
It's maybe
Nikki,
because we're not making massive fraud, and maybe that's why we're not millionaires.
Right. I wanted to ask you though, Nikki, because before I worked in real estate, I didn't know what the Fed was. Can you explain what the Fed is? Because I didn't know for the longest time.
The Fed. So the federal, you're gonna get me going on a tangent right now, but the Fed is a private group that runs our country's monetary decisions. So they set the rates for borrowing for the government, for banks, for everybody. And so they're the ones making the decisions.
But they're privately owned? They're
Yes.
not a branch of the government? I thought that they were the government.
No, the Fed is
I
not
didn't
the
even know
government.
that.
They're privately owned. And the Fed was created in 1913. And there's a whole big conspiracy about that that is super interesting. We could bust out the tinfoil hats someday and
For
really
sure.
dive into that, because it was basically created by the guy who started Chase Bank. Like, he had a huge role in creating the Fed. And
Interesting, because it's called the Federal Reserve. The Fed is short for Federal Reserve.
correct.
Right? So that I just hearing that name made me assume that it was government run. You're the first
No.
person to tell me that it's not.
No, it's not government
So
run.
why does the Fed control everything if they're not run by the government? That's what I don't understand. They're like the ones that control and set inflation and everything.
Yeah, not so much control inflation, because their only tool to combat inflation is to increase rates to make it so that people buy less shit. That's how they can control inflation. They can't force companies to drop their prices, and they can't force people to buy less stuff. And like I said, there are certain things that we just have to buy. We have to buy food. We have to buy, you have to have insurance.
We have to have food, gas,
and that's why
rent, housing costs.
Exactly. The things that you have to have are where we've seen prices rise the most. Rise the most. And
Rise the roast.
and my tinfoil hat theory on it is that the way capitalism works, well, I think capitalism is amazing. And
which you and I have differing. It's going to be interesting breaking into that in future episodes, I think, because we have differing opinions about that. For
sure. I mean, if you look across the world, though, at the countries who don't have capitalism and the ones who do, I don't know about you, personally, I wouldn't want to live in China. I wouldn't want to live in Russia. So the success, that system also has its own flaws. But capitalism does too. And the big one for me for capitalism is that if a company charges something and people are paying it, why would they drop their prices for anything, right? Because they're going to make less profit. And because
it ain't fair, because we shouldn't have to pay for something.
Life ain't fair, I agree with you. I agree with you, which is why I feel like the current form of capitalism may have spiraled out of control a slight bit, because what happened was we had a pandemic, and something the world had never seen or hasn't seen in a very long time. And when that happened, the Fed fucked up, and they kept rates too low for too long. And they didn't catch inflation. If you go back to 2021 and 2022, inflation started creeping up, and Jerome Powell is the most powerful non-elected man in the world. He's the chair of the Fed. And so when prices started coming up, there were reporters and economists who were starting to say, like, hey, inflation's creeping up. we need to raise rates, because they were at zero for a really long time to prop up the economy, because they literally shut everything down. So to keep the economy going, the Fed took rates to zero. And not only that, they were buying a shit ton of bonds and mortgage-backed securities. So not only did they keep rates really low, but they were propping up the economy by buying a shit ton of bonds and mortgage-backed securities, which pumped millions and millions of dollars into the economy. And so this caused inflation to start going up. And Jerome Powell's famous comment is that this inflation is transitory, which means it's just going to go away. It's going to come down on its own.
But in 2024, it ain't going away.
It didn't. They were very wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, because during the pandemic, I was still a teacher. I didn't know anything really about the economy. I was only watching the news in terms of like what was safe, what was healthy, you know, like what was COVID risk and stuff like that. I didn't pay attention to anything going on with the economy because I simply didn't care. And we were doing fine, you know? So I didn't know that there was going to be such an aftermath because of all of the things that they were doing, like all of the stimulus checks and everything like that.
Yeah, you know, it was less I don't believe it was people getting $1,200 that caused this problem. It was that they kept rates at zero, and they were buying all these bonds and mortgage-backed securities, which pumped billions of dollars into the economy. And when you pump that much money into the economy, there are penalties, and we're paying those right now. I worked in the mortgage industry at that time, and in the mortgage industry, it was the best time ever, you know, because rates were crazy low. That's when everybody was getting 2% and 3% on 30-year mortgages.
And now they're all stuck in their houses like I am, like a lot of people are.
I don't like the word stuck, because you're better off being stuck in a 2 or 3% mortgage than trying to buy right now at 6 or 7%.
Right.
You know, so
that's the thing, is that
you're blessed. I prefer blessed versus stuck.
Right. No, I'm so glad that like I have a house and that we're not currently renting, that we didn't hold out for like some, you know, bigger, fancier place or whatever. Like, because when we first moved in here in 2017, our goal was to be out by 2020, and because of the pandemic, we never left. So in our day-to-day lives now, like my day-to-day life at work, seeing like the first-time home buyers and stuff I'm working with, like I literally am encountering people that they have 3 kids, they need a 3-bedroom place, they can only afford a 2-bedroom. Or I met this lady the other day, her and her husband both have advanced degrees. She has a job and he just finished his and he's looking for one, and they are looking for a trailer. They're going to squeeze to afford a trailer, and they're sharing a car.
Hey, they make some nice manufactured homes these days, though.
They do.
They do make some really nice manufactured homes. It's not the same old DW from the 8 Mile movie.
I know, it's just
there are really
sad
nice manufactured homes, but definitely.
Because think about it, because that particular family, they're not from the U.S. Everyone sold this American dream. They come here and they're like, oh, I can barely afford anything actually, and so I can't imagine for not being from here and then coming here having all these expectations, and then it being expectation versus reality type thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you got to make do with what we have here, you know, because, you know, I guess, you know, depending on where they're from, you know, it's still most likely there's still most likely more opportunity here. At least I would like to believe than where they were. I don't know what it's like trying to buy a house in those other countries, you know. Yeah. But it is definitely more difficult, you know, like we were talking about with groceries being so much more expensive. And these are things too, when you're qualifying for a mortgage, that we don't count into your debt to income ratio, we call it, which is like one of the biggest factors into how much you're approved for. We don't count your car insurance, we don't count your grocery bills, but you have to consider that when you're buying a house, to make sure that, hey, with the monthly payment I'm going to have, I still got to be able to buy groceries, I still got to be able to pay my car insurance.
Who knows when they're going to just surprise raise all that shit again.
You know, the Fed's target goal for inflation is 2%, so it's not so much that.
Do you know what percentage we're at right now?
Yeah, 3.1. So prices
that
are up
like a
3.1%
catastrophe?
year over year. No, it's much closer to where it needs to be. The target goal is 2%. They're getting closer to it, but that doesn't mean prices have come down. It simply means that the growth in prices has slowed. And so we need that to stay at a safe level for a reasonable amount of time. And even then I still believe that we need prices to come down some. And for prices to come down some, we need these companies to make $1 billion less dollars. We need, instead of making 10 billion, we need them to make 9 billion. Or I think, Walmart just had their earnings last week and they made like 6 billion in the quarter. We need Walmart to chill out a little bit on the 6 billion, and the problem with that is shareholders, right? A lot of these companies are traded on the stock market, and if these companies make less money, their stock goes down, and then the CEO and all the big board members, they all make less money, which they're not willing to do because of capitalism. So
do you think there's any hope? Like, this is something I think about all the time, because like there's no ethical way to be a billionaire is a belief that I hold. Right?
I believe that too. I don't think anybody needs $1 billion.
Right. And so is there any chance or any hope for like any kind of legislation to like kind of cap somebody's income at a certain level?
You don't think so? The people in power would never let that happen. And that's both sides of the aisle, not one side of the aisle or another.
Right.
That this isn't about blue or red, it's about green. And both sides of the aisle, many of the senators and people in Congress, they're all millionaires or multimillionaires, and they make $173,000 a year, I believe, is their salary. So for them to make millions of dollars, it's because they're shareholders of these companies. Nancy Pelosi just hit a huge lick on Nvidia. Nvidia is a chip company, and their stock has blown up over like 200% in the last couple years. And she made like over $1 million on a trade. They just had their earnings yesterday, and they are up like an insane amount. And she's up like over $1 million on this trade in like a 6-month period.
Well, then shouldn't our elected officials like not be allowed to like do those kinds of investments because it's a conflict of interest?
1000%. Sports players aren't allowed to bet on sports. The guy on the Detroit Lions, Jamison Williams, our first round draft pick, he got suspended for 6 games to start the season because he was betting on college football in an NFL building. He wasn't even betting on NFL games, but that's how serious they take that. But we let our elected officials, when you're buying a stock, you're betting on that company that they're going to make more money. And especially if you're legislating that company, a lot of these people sit on the committees that make laws and regulations for these companies. It is absolutely a conflict of interest, and I think a big problem.
Right, yeah. It's like, I don't know, I guess we're just sitting here in my basement, and there's nothing that we can really do about it right now, but like the thing that I am glad for at least is that like at least learning about this kind of thing means that you can feel a little bit better about yourself, because we're all doing our best, we're all doing everything we can, and there's just like these things that are so huge that it's really not our fault. Like when you hear people telling us like you just need to work more, you're lazy, you just complain, you're not trying hard enough, like to me learning about all these big systemic issues that we have, it at least makes me feel better that I'm not a piece of shit, that I'm not so lazy, and that it's all my fault. And there's a lot still that I can do, and there's a lot still that I have done to stay afloat, and it's still possible. It's just, we have the ceiling that we have because of things that are completely out of our control. And so just getting the conversation going, I think, is helpful, at least for future generations,
Yeah, I mean, it is an unfortunate truth, and something that I feel like I've realized over the last years, that in times like these, you do need to work harder, probably. We do need to push each other and help each other more, because it is harder to get by day when you have groceries up 25%, and car insurance is up 38% in the last 2 years. Homeowners insurance is up 32% in the last 2 years. Jeez. And all of these things, make it more difficult. And, you can either keep working the same amount and have less money, or, You can find ways to, you got to find ways to cut costs or make more money. That's what you got to do.
Right.
It's not easy, but...
Yup, and stay informed and vote in every election and keep yourself educated, guys.
The problem with voting is that, like I said, it's people on both sides of the aisle that are causing these problems. So the current options.
The local is what matters more, in my opinion, don't you think?
Yeah, but even at the local level, I think that there's people on all sides of the aisle that are here in Michigan. So many of the city board members and elected officials have been busted for corruption and embezzlement and all kinds of stuff like that.
Oh, I had once upon a time a supervisor of mine at an old job that was embezzling money off of the school basketball team. So even a middle school basketball coach will do it. Anyone with any kind of power will do it. So it is everywhere for sure, but I don't know. I feel like it's not. I feel like we still have to like do something, even
revolt.
Even if it's just like even if it's just like a formality. And of course, my phone, which I was recording off of, got the storage full, even though I thought I had enough stuff deleted. So here we are on my crappy camera because Broke Millennial only has a 1080p. So I hope that some of this information kind of helped bring light to you guys of what actually is happening with inflation, rather than just like throwing the buzzword around and complaining about it, because we're all seeing more of a struggle. We don't know exactly where it's coming from. So yeah.
Well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back for more tinfoil hat theories and fun chat soon.
Absolutely. All right. I hope you guys like our new podcast, our first episode. See you guys later. Okay, thanks. Bye. It's a Broke Millenials.